Welcome to Module 4. This is Recognizing Drug Misuse. Unlike alcohol, which has fairly predictable sets of effects, drug misuse is going to look very different depending on what the substance is. Some drugs speed people up, others slow them down, and some alter their perception altogether. And that's going to make it a little bit more complex for supervisors to recognize impairment, but just as critical. Both illegal drugs and misused prescription medications can compromise safety-sensitive duties. So, for example, a driver misusing opioids for pain or stimulants for focus can be just as impaired as someone under the influence of alcohol. Drug misuse may also be harder to detect because the signs aren't always obvious. There isn't always an odor, and employees may be skilled at hiding their use. And that's why your training is so important. You're going to learn to look for subtle but consistent indicators. The DOT requires that supervisors be able to recognize the signs of drug misuse for the same reason they require alcohol training, to prevent accidents, to help protect employees, and also to ensure public safety. So let's start with the major categories of drugs that you might encounter. Stimulants like cocaine or methamphetamine or even misused ADHD medications are going to speed up the body. It's going to cause restlessness, rapid speech, sometimes aggression. Depressants like opioids or sedatives have the opposite effect. It's going to slow everything down. Employees might appear drowsy or maybe sluggish. Maybe they just look like they're just out of it. And then we have hallucinogens. This is going to be your LSD, PCP, mushrooms, DMT, things like that. And those things are going to alter perception and behavior. And sometimes that leads to unpredictable or unsafe actions. Cannabis is a category all on its own. THC products are going to affect coordination. They're going to affect reaction time and memory. And because marijuana laws are varying by states, some employees might mistakenly think that it's acceptable to use it before or even during work. But under DOT regulations, cannabis use is strictly prohibited for safety-sensitive employees. So one of the clearest indicators of drug misuse is changes in the eyes. Stimulants often cause dilated pupils, while opioids cause pinpoint pupils. And these signs are difficult to fake and can be a very strong indicator of impairment. You might also notice like sudden weight loss or sudden weight gain, especially if the drug use is ongoing. Stimulants are going to lead to rapid weight loss, and depressants are going to lead to weight gain and maybe neglected appearance. Unsteady movements like difficulty standing still, maybe tremors in the hands, or visible shaking. Those are other physical red flags. These are especially concerning when the employee is about to perform a task that requires precision or coordination. Physical signs are often the first clues that you're going to notice, but they become even more meaningful when we pair them with changes in behavior or performance. And drug misuse often changes the way that employees interact with other people. Some people may become more paranoid, or maybe they're just constantly worried that other people are watching them, or constantly worried that other people are talking about them. Others might swing between euphoria and irritability within minutes. And stimulants are often going to create a sense of overconfidence or maybe hyperactivity. The employee might talk rapidly, interrupt other people, or act like they just have endless energy. Then on the other hand, depressants are going to make the employee withdrawn or uninterested in communication. Another clue is secrecy. Employees misusing drugs might isolate themselves. They might disappear for long periods, or maybe they go out of the way to hide what they're doing. And these changes in behavior are going to be important to document, especially if they're out of character. Performance almost always suffers when drugs are involved. So a dependable worker might suddenly struggle with simple tasks, or maybe they forget steps that they've done correctly for years. And difficulty concentrating is another sign. Employees might start a job and then leave it unfinished, or maybe they bounce between tasks without completing them. Confusion or forgetfulness is common, especially with depressant or cannabis use. The key here is change. If an employee who was once reliable starts making repeated mistakes, you need to look at whether drug misuse might be a factor. And we always want to pair the performance issues with the physical or the behavioral signs to build a stronger case for suspicion. Stimulants like cocaine, methamphetamine, or misused prescription medications, they create a speeding up effect of the body and the mind. Employees may appear to have endless energy. Maybe they're talking quickly, moving constantly, or maybe they're pacing. Their pupils are usually dilated even in normal light, and they might have trouble sitting still. Maybe their movements look jittery or erratic. Stimulants can cause irritability or maybe sudden aggression. And an employee might seem overly confident one minute and then extremely irritable the next. And these mood swings, they're definitely red flags. So supervisors should be especially concerned if stimulant signs are appearing during or before safety-sensitive tasks, since overconfidence and aggression can lead to dangerous mistakes. Depressants like opioids or sedatives, they're going to slow down the central nervous system. Employees might appear extremely drowsy, sometimes even nodding off at their workstations. Pinpoint pupils are a strong indicator of opioid use, and combined with the slurred speech or slow responses, they're going to create a very clear picture of impairment. So supervisors have to act immediately in those cases. A drowsy driver or a drowsy machine operator is a danger to themselves and everyone around them. And hallucinogens are less common, but extremely dangerous in safety-sensitive environments. They're altering perception, and that's going to mean that employees might see or hear or believe that things are happening that aren't really real. You might notice unusual statements or maybe unusual behavior like paranoia or unpredictable actions. Employees that are under the influence of hallucinogens might appear maybe disconnected from reality. And even though these cases might be rare, they're going to pose a very high safety risk. And supervisors have to remove the employee from duty if these signs appear. And cannabis is one of the most common substances that supervisors encounter, especially with the increasing legalization of marijuana at the state level. But we have to remember, under DOT rules, marijuana use is prohibited for safety-sensitive employees. It does not matter what the state law is. So physical signs are going to include bloodshot eyes and maybe a distinct odor of marijuana. Employees may have be showing slowed reaction times, or maybe they have difficulty concentrating or problems with their short-term memory. Like you told them to do something and then they just completely forgot. And cannabis is also going to affect coordination and judgment. And these are critical in driving and machine operation. Even if the employee claims that they only used it off duty, the effects can last long enough to impair workplace performance. And the supervisors have to treat marijuana use the same as alcohol or any other drug. If impairment is suspected, remove the employee from duty and immediate testing. And impairment can be often noticed before the shift even starts. So an employee might arrive late, maybe they look disheveled, maybe they display obvious signs like the odor of marijuana or difficulty focusing. And these are red flags that maybe they've used drugs or they still have the substance in their system. And some supervisors hesitate to act if the employee insists that they used the drug the night before. But under DOT rules, that doesn't matter. If they show up impaired at the start of a safety-sensitive shift, they must be removed. It's going to be important to make observations early, before the employee begins any tasks. This protects protects both the employee and other people from harm, and it's going to also ensure that your documentation reflects the earliest possible signs. And drug misuse doesn't always show itself at the start of the shift. Sometimes it becomes apparent during the workday. Maybe you notice that an employee is disappearing for long periods, or they're taking excessive breaks, or maybe they're leaving their work area without explanation. Maybe their energy level also shifts suddenly. A worker maybe returns from a break unusually energized or restless, or on the flip side, maybe they become extremely lethargic after their break. And these abrupt changes should raise your suspicion. Another major clue is the presence of suspicious containers or paraphernalia. And that might be like baggies or pipes or foils or other items that maybe aren't associated with the workplace. And when these signs appear during a shift, your responsibility is going to be the same. Observe, document, and act immediately. Waiting until the end of the shift puts everybody at risk. And even if the employee doesn't use drugs during work hours, after hours misuse is still going to show up at work. Maybe they come in the next morning fatigued or irritable or unable to concentrate. And these hangover-like symptoms make it dangerous to perform safety-sensitive duties. Repeated after-hours misuse leads to long-term decline in performance. So you might notice more mistakes or reduced output or maybe even increasing conflicts with coworkers. And as a supervisor, you don't need to know when the drug was used. If it's affecting the present, like right now during the work hours, then that employee is not fit for duty. The DOT makes it very clear the timing of use is irrelevant if the impairment is existing at work. So imagine a driver that reports for duty with dilated pupils. They're talking rapidly, they're pacing back and forth while waiting for their instructions. These are clear stimulant-related warning signs. So at first glance, the driver just might appear enthusiastic. But when we combine that with the physical symptoms, that behavior suggests drug misuse. So as a supervisor, you're going to note those specifics: dilated pupils, pressured speech, restless pacing, rather than just writing vague descriptions like acted strange. It's going to be easy to dismiss the high energy as nervousness or excitement, but in safety-sensitive roles, you can't take chances like that. Document your observations, remove the driver, arrange for testing. And this example is just kind of highlighting the importance of not downplaying signs simply because they don't look like the stereotypical drugged behavior. Sometimes impairment shows up as overactivity instead of sluggishness. Maybe it's a mechanic. You find the mechanic nodding off at their workstation. The mechanic has pinpoint pupils and slurred speech. And that scenario is consistent with opioid or sedative misuse. And allowing that employee to continue working is going to impose an immediate danger, not only to them, but to anybody relying on their repairs. A single mistake in maintenance could cause an accident down the line. And so the correct response is to document the physical signs and remove the employee from duty. Do not allow them to continue until testing is completed. An office-based employee maybe starts acting paranoid. They're convinced that other coworkers are talking about them. They're speaking erratically. They're jumping from topic to topic. They're forgetting how to perform simple tasks that they normally complete with ease. And those behaviors may indicate stimulant misuse or hallucinogen use or even cannabis impairment. So regardless of those specific situations or the specific substance, the impairment is clear. So as a supervisor, your responsibility isn't to identify the exact drug. It's just simply to recognize that the employee is unfit for duty. Document what you see. So you might write down employee displayed paranoia, erratic speech, and forgot routine steps. And when we record the specific details, you're protecting yourself and the company from accusations of bias, and you're demonstrating that your actions were fact-based. So maybe an employee returns from a break with a strong odor of marijuana on their clothes. You notice a slowed reaction time. There's some difficulty remembering instructions that were given just minutes earlier. And even if the marijuana is legal in your state, the DOT regulations prohibit its use for safety-sensitive employees. So that means you cannot ignore these signs. Your documentation should clearly note the odor, the slowed reactions, and the memory problems. These objective observations are enough to justify testing. And documentation is your best protection as a supervisor. Write down exactly what you observed, not what you assume, what you observed. So, for example, instead of writing employee was high, you're going to write employee had dilated pupils, was talking rapidly, and could not sit still at 9:15 a.m. in the dispatch office. Always include the time and the place of the observation, and this is going to ensure that your notes can stand up during audits or investigations. Avoid speculation. Do not guess about what drug that you think was used. Your role is to document observable facts, not to diagnose or investigate. And when impairment is suspected, you need to remove the employee from safety-sensitive duties immediately. This step cannot be delayed or debated. Safety is the top priority here. So explain to the employee calmly and professionally that based on your observations, they cannot continue their work until further testing is completed. You don't need to argue or convince them, right? Your documentation speaks for itself. Never allow an employee that you suspect is impaired to return to their work without clearance. Doing so is going to put lives at risk, and it's going to put your company in violation of DOT regulations. So remember, you're not punishing the employee, you are protecting them. You're protecting their coworkers, and you're also protecting the public from any potential harm. And once an employee has been removed from duty, the next step is testing. Arrange for a drug test as quickly as possible. The sooner that test is done, the stronger the evidence. If there's delays, document the reason. DOT auditors are going to want to know why a test did not happen promptly, and your notes are going to protect the company. And always follow your company's established protocols for testing. That's going to ensure consistency and compliance with both company policy and federal regulations. Remember that confidentiality is essential when we're handling drug misuse cases. We only share details with HR or management staff who are authorized to be involved. Other employees do not need to know, and gossip needs to be avoided at all costs. Maintaining confidentiality is going to protect the employee's dignity, and it ensures fairness in the process. Even if that employee is impaired, they do deserve to be treated with respect. And this is going to protect the company legally, because mishandling confidential information can lead to lawsuits or claims of discrimination. So supervisors are going to set the tone by treating every case professionally and discreetly. So to wrap up, remember that drug misuse can appear in many forms. Physical signs like dilated pupils or drowsiness, behavioral changes like paranoia or aggression, and performance issues like errors or forgetfulness are all going to point to potential impairment. Your role is not to diagnose or speculate about what drug was used. Your role is to recognize, document, and act. Specific factual notes are going to be your best tool for demonstrating reasonable suspicion. And when impairment is suspected, we want to act immediately. Remove the employee from duty, arrange testing, and maintain confidentiality at all times. And those steps are going to protect your team, your company, and the public. So let's finish here with a short knowledge check. Which drugs cause dilated pupils? Which cause pinpoint pupils? Can marijuana use ever be allowed if DOT rules apply, even if it's legal in the state? And what should your documentation include? So a hint here, focus on the specifics, the time, the place, and observable behaviors. And what exactly is your role as a supervisor when you suspect impairment? And then finally, why is confidentiality so important in these cases? Think about the employee's dignity, the company's reputation, and your legal responsibilities. Reflecting on these questions is going to help lock in essentials that you're going to need on the job.